Yeah.
Oh, hello, and welcome to yet another podcast.
Just barreling right into it, not even with any silence before the recording.
No. We're getting right into it, Brandon. Because
Okay.
it's been a while. And I miss you guys. I think we might have missed a podcast episode drop. And for that, we are sincerely sorry.
I mean, I think everybody understands, because everybody deals with this, is there's just a lot going on right now. And in any individual's life, you have to sort of you hit the wall. And we had a conversation about it like more than a week ago. And we were like, maybe just not this week, because I just don't think any of us have the mental bandwidth for this right now. And that's fair.
Yeah, we collectively hit the same wall at the same time.
Yeah. So it's fine. My main regret was just not getting any deep dives up for the Patreon, which is something that we actually intended to do, but then just weren't able to do because of the aforementioned wall. But, there we go.
Well, I know everything is crazy right now, but how are you guys doing besides?
Josh?
So tired. Work had a big event this week, and so we had a bunch of people in from out of town. And of course, when you work in IT, people coming in from out of town means they wander into your office and they go, I've been having problems with this thing for the last 3 or 4 months. And it's been really driving me crazy. But I knew I was going to see you during the quarterly. So here I am. My machine is broken. Please help.
I also don't currently have my machine, so if you could just tell me through interpretive dance, that would be preferred.
Write some instructions down for me.
No, fortunately, everybody brings their machines in. This time actually was less that. That's typically what I deal with a lot of. This time was more, we're trying to move people from Windows 10 to Windows 11 before it deprecates in October, which is a ton of fun for everyone who's involved. And everyone is they're loving Windows 11. Let me tell you what, they're loving it. They're looking at it and they're going, it's different. And I like that. And yeah, that's pretty much universally been my experience moving people to Windows 11. It's just how much they love how different it is. Wait, sorry, have I been saying love this whole time? I mean hate. They hate how different it is.
That's probably a good PSA, though, for a listener viewer. Just in case you haven't actually migrated to Windows 11, what happens if you rebel and just stick with Windows 10, Jish?
They stop sending you updates for Windows 10, period. And then your computer slowly becomes hacker cheese in that it has many holes in it, and hackers know how to get inside those holes and gnaw away at the core within.
Okay.
So get it changed and updated today. That's right. You listening to this podcast right now, buy more technology.
Yeah.
That's what this show's about.
That's one of the things I did.
To buy new tech.
That's one of the things I did. I bought a new laptop. I bought one of the new MacBook Airs, the M4 chip ones that came
fancy.
out. Because I still have my educational email from grad school, so I was able to get $100 off.
Hell yeah.
Dodging those Windows updates with an alternate system. Also an option.
Yeah.
Buy more tech.
I was going to say, Brandon liked Windows 11 so much he got an Apple.
I've been using Macs for really the last 20 years. There was a period in there where I had a Windows laptop, but once I had money again, I went back to Apple. Just because it's just way easier to deal with, in my opinion. And my only sacrifice is not being able to play every Steam game that I want to, but I also don't have time for that anymore. So it becomes less and less of a problem as the years go on.
I mean, you can also just boot camp a Windows OS onto your Mac pretty easily.
The problem is the hard drive space for it, because I have SSDs. And I was unwilling to sacrifice 56 gigabytes of my computer on my Mac Mini just so I could play Age of Kings HD edition through Steam on it. So actually what I ended up doing was getting the Goblin computer out that we used to have at the studio, and I updated it to Windows 11.
Hell yeah.
And I just play Age of Kings on that now.
A sensible solution for a modern era.
I mean, I don't want to tangent away from our
You don't want to tangent away from the completely tabletop unrelated things on our tabletop.
I mean, I don't want to tangent away from our catching up segment here, but you should just get a Steam Deck. right? I mean, with the way things are happening with Switch and Nintendo, which I'm sure we can talk about if you want to.
Yeah. All right. So I wasn't going to buy a Switch 2. Because, as you all know, I have other concerns going on right now.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, and let's see, April, May, June, July. In about 4 months, I've got major other concern happening. So I was only sort of halfway paying attention to it, but one of my best friends was posting about it in our Discord. And because I hadn't even paid attention to the Switch 2 pricing when they announced it, since it was irrelevant to me. And I was like, that's too much for a game system. I was like, if I really, really wanted one, because because for the Switch 2, I think you're going to be able to have GameCube on the retro consoles on there, which you don't have on the current Switch. But that's just that's not enough of a draw for me. But 400, what was it, 449 or something like that?
It's 349 or 400 with the game.
Okay. Yeah, that's too much. And I know it's not a handheld console, since you can connect it to the TV and everything, but it's portable. And for me, there's a psychological thing about spending that much money for a portable system. And now we're getting into rant territory now, but I'm just sort of on a roll.
No, I don't want to talk about it, because it's not just the price of the handheld itself, it's the price of the games too.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, if you do an inflation calculation for that, actually buying in equivalent dollars, buying a Super Nintendo game like Chrono Trigger, it was because I remember that was $79 back in 1995, and in today's money that would be $160. So you get the argument from Nintendo that it's it's actually cheaper dollars to donuts for what it was back then. But
we're not charging you what we could charge you.
Yeah, that's a bullshit. I'll tell you why that's a bullshit argument, because a lot of the cost for the games back then was involved in the manufacture of the cartridges. Just having to, because that was before we had really affordable plastic printing and everything. So that's
for the game guide, right? Because they had a little leaflet inside the case, which had the artwork attached to it. Sure.
And having to source all the PCBs and everything for it, there's virtually no physical cost to these games now.
There is about triple the design cost, though.
Right. But there doesn't need to be any physical cost, technically, with the way they do it now.
Which is why it was weird when they said that digital downloaded games are going to be $80 and then the physical game is going to be $90. And can you guys confirm this? Because I haven't looked into it, and I honestly should have looked into it before the podcast, but I heard that it's not an actual game cartridge that you're getting in the physical copy, that it's actually cardstock with a code that allows you to activate the digital copy through the handheld itself. Is that correct?
A product they are going to offer. It is not everybody everywhere. It's Nintendo says they're going to stop selling physical cartridges so that you can't have physical cartridges.
Okay, good. Yeah, debunk this, Jish.
That is not what Nintendo said. They're taking one line out of a press release and expanding it to really ridiculous degrees. What Nintendo said was that they were going to start offering as a product a key card cartridge that is essentially your permission to download the game. My understanding is that they are going to offer that as a replacement for the digital download cards that you find at places like GameStop. The idea being, this is something that you can pass off to a friend as a loaner, so that they have the key card and the permission to download the game and you don't.
That's
similar to how you would pass off a physical copy. Now, I'm
surprised they would allow that kind of licensing sharing between users that aren't necessarily customers.
They're expanding their license sharing quite a bit, actually.
I guess you would still have to own the handheld, though, in order to use it, right?
So you'd have to own the handheld. And it's I think it's just the same concept of giving out a freebie of your content, really, because that's if somebody's coming into it I'm not paying $80 for a game, and then their friend is like, hey, I just played the new Zelda game, do you want to borrow my access code for it for a few days to give it a try? They weren't going to get that $80 anyway So letting this person try it may be the thing that gets them over the hump to get it.
Additionally, on top of that, they are adding functionality so that you can loan your games digitally to your friends for up to 2 weeks at a time.
Without a subscription fee or with a subscription fee?
I'm almost certain that everybody involved has to have a Nintendo Switch Online subscription. Yeah. And probably, frankly, the Plus version.
Yeah.
Which, all right, let me double check. I'm going to look at price real quick while Brandon starts his next rant.
Talking about the subscriptions for Nintendo, it's like we share a Switch here. I have a profile on her Switch that I got her for Christmas one year. She has the Nintendo subscription on her profile, and that means I can't play things on my profile. Like I can't play the Virtual Console stuff on my profile because it requires the subscription. And I think that's crazy. I also think it's crazy that I can't have a separate Animal Crossing profile on there. I have to play on her island, which is already fully developed.
My relationship was tested with that one too.
I'm
like, you named our island what?
Yeah.
But it's okay. It wasn't a bad name. I just wasn't consulted, and I didn't realize that I had no say in it after I opened up the game too. But like, yeah, you're right. That kind of feature sharing is available on other consoles. Like if you're paying for the subscription features on either PlayStation or
right. We can both use whatever on the old PS4. But that again comes back to the Switch technically being a portable system because they want you to buy more Switches.
They do. So here's the thing with the NSO.
I like how this is just a Nintendo episode now too, by the way.
I mean it's gaming, so we're at least in the right topic field. An NSO subscription for a year for one person is $50. With the expansion. That's, all of the feature sets that they offer. A family subscription, which is what they really want you to get, is $80 and can have up to 8 people on it simultaneously. So at the point where it's $10 per person per year.
Per device though, right?
Because
it's not like this. Does the family plan extend to accounts on the handheld or to other handhelds in the network?
But doesn't that mean we're talking like 8 people sharing a Switch?
I mean, it's 8 people sharing a Switch, 4 people sharing a Switch between 2 Switches. Like whatever math you want to do on that. I
hope it's portable to other devices. Was my concern.
It's account attached. So. If I sign in to Brandon's Switch, my NSO subscription is attached to my account.
Yeah, that makes sense. That tracks.
Yeah, but I would just much rather it be tied to the device because I'll tell you, I'm not paying $50 or $80 so I can play Breath of Fire 2 that came out in 1994 on my Switch account.
I think there should be a version of it that is device attached. Yes. I think that is sensible and reasonable for, especially if you're a family that can barely afford a Switch in the first place.
Yeah.
And so you're already all sharing one Switch. Odds are good you're not going to have the extra.
Yeah.
Let's see, for $35 versus 20. Well, it's only $15, but even so, like you're not going to have the extra $15 a year for a subscription.
And talking about affording a Switch, like we completely got away from this, but talking about the Switch 2 and after the tariffs were initially announced, because Switch 2 pre-orders were supposed to open up on like June 9th, right? Or
no, Switch 2 pre-orders were open immediately because Switch 2 was supposed to start shipping on June 9th.
That's right. But
and then they were like, oh God, what are these tariffs going to do to our margins?
Yeah. So then the United States is like, it gets told, nope, actually, no, you can't pre-order any of these. And didn't they cancel anybody who'd already pre-ordered it in the US?
I I haven't seen confirmation of that. That wouldn't entirely surprise me, but
that seems like a strange business move, though. I mean,
it's either that or they're going
to refund everyone's money. You could still try and apply that to a new device at some point. Be like, hey, you get partial credit for whatever the full retail value is. No,
I will tell you right now, nothing is going to make a business less popular. Given that Elon Musk already did this with Tesla, nothing makes a business less popular than telling somebody something is going to cost a certain amount of money, letting them prepay all of that money, and then right as they're getting excited about this thing they're about to get, rug pulling them and going, hey, guess what? If you actually want it, you need to give us significantly more money.
You're a super finalist now, though. You only need to pay $250 to become one of the eligible recipients of the discounted Switches.
Oh, Lord.
But then there started to be speculation that we're actually looking at like a north of $600 price point for Switch 2s in the United States. I saw that in a couple of different places. Josh is looking like he doesn't believe that.
That to me sounds like people doing napkin math and coming out weird with it.
Kind of like how the tariffs were applied in the first place.
I mean, the tariffs, to my estimation, it looks like the tariffs were applied by ChatGPT.
But anyway.
Wait, but they were.
Heard in McDonald Islands, really, with all of their imports that they
their penguin imports. But
should we just veer solidly in the tariffs? I mean, we can talk about cons or use that as momentum.
Just to sew up the Nintendo part of the conversation. It's like in 2019, Nintendo started moving a lot of their manufacturing infrastructure out of China just because they feared this happening. And they've been moving it to like Vietnam and several other places in Southeast Asia. So, and since all that happened, like for everywhere but China, the tariffs have been reduced to like 10%. So I would say now we're probably looking at far less significant increases on Switch 2 pricing. But also, just to put this in perspective for the real world, the last thing anybody needs to worry about right now is the cost of the Switch 2s because of the tariffs, when literally everything we import into this country basically is coming from China. Like, forget about your Shine, forget about your Temu, forget about probably Alibaba too. All that stuff's going to be wildly expensive.
Honestly, let's be honest here, viewers, listeners. You're better than that, right? Don't you want products that will last for your entire life instead of just things that satisfy your dopamine fixation at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're panic scrolling away from this administration's decisions? Like, I get it. Mm-hmm. That drug is so good.
Yeah, and have I mentioned that everything Goblins and Growlers produces is printed in the United States?
It's true. And we made that as an active decision. We were given the option of starting to print stuff in China, and there were a couple of reasons why we didn't. Thing number one was we didn't like the amount of quality control we were going to have over those products. Because if we want to get something set up, printed, and shipped before we go to a convention, we're not usually working with like a 4-month lead time. So that means that if the proofs get to us and they're awful, we have a few weeks to get it remedied, reprinted, and shipped again.
Which is what happened in December.
That's exactly what happened in December. That's why we have some oops copies at our vendor booth. So
50% off Animazement, May 23rd, 24th, 25th.
Oh, hey, speaking of cons. Oliver.
But we decided there were a lot of good reasons for it. Like, even if we might have been able to get like some better print quality out of it, just because of mechanically what they were able to do for a lower cost over there, we just decided it wasn't worth it for a lot of reasons.
Now, admittedly, part of that for us is we're not printing 500, 1,000, 10,000 copies of literally anything.
I wish we had the money to do that, because it would drive our per unit cost down through the floor. It would be amazing. It would cost us like 10 cents to print some of that stuff.
Oh my God.
If we're ordering like thousands of them.
Yeah, at the point that you're ordering like 10,000 of something, the per unit cost, if y'all aren't already familiar with this, the per unit cost just like plummets. It is incredible. So we made the decision to print local. In fact, we print super local. I think we've used print shops in Richmond for a lot of our stuff. Mm-hmm. I think we branched out a little bit further recently, didn't we, Brandon?
I mean, I have a printer that I use for a lot of our larger orders in New York State. But it's really nice because like we get free shipping after a certain threshold that's very low. And it's usually just like 2 days. Just sending it down 95 basically. But we do have a local printer in Richmond that we use for like business cards and like emergency stuff and banners and things like that. And they're it's Uptown Color in Richmond, on Main. They're fantastic to work with. I have a really good relationship with our account manager there.
And now you know that you can't do a Goblins and Growlers heist out of Uptown Color because we print so intermittently and weird quantities of stuff that it'd be impossible to know when the product's going to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I was looking at the while we were talking about this, I was looking at the printing cost estimator. If we got 10,000 of something done that had like 24 pages, it would cost about $1 a piece.
Good Lord. Now, the thing I think that we should keep in mind for our audience, because not all of them may know this, is that most of the stuff we print, we also have agreements with the authors and the artists, and then we ourselves have costs, and all of that goes into our book prices.
Also, we're not printing 10,000 of something, so it's not $1.
But we could be, audience, if you just tell one more friend about our lovely imperfect products.
And then they tell a friend.
Now, we'll build our pyramid one day.
See, I was just about to say, if you can get your friend to tell 5 friends, and then each of their 5 friends tells 5 friends, and then we'll give you a $20 off discount.
Motion to redesign the bumper next episode.
Fantastic.
All right. So, I mean, I know you guys just got back from Triad. So did you hear anything from the people and other vendors out there related to tariffs? I mean, what's going on in the landscape of the games industry?
I didn't hear that much from other like regular attendees about tariffs, but I did hear a lot of like financial uncertainty. Like a lot of financial uncertainty. It seems to me to be more revolving around, we don't know if there's about to be a recession. And if there is, there's a decent chance that I lose my job, was kind of the theme of things we were hearing from folks. And so they were like, I was really excited to come here. I'm still excited to be here, but I'm trying not to spend a bunch of money while I'm here because I'm so nervous about what the economy's about to do.
We heard a lot of people who came by our booth who were like, oh, this is all great, but I've spent my con budget already. Like I dialed it back from last year. And then one day, I think it was like Saturday, I had to go out to the car to get some things. And while I was coming, I was parked in the parking garage near the hotel. And while I was coming down the elevator, there were 2 women who got on and they looked at my badge and they're like, oh, the badges look so cool this year. And I was like, oh, are you guys going? And they said, no, we're not going this year. We decided to save our money for Animazement because this was in Triad's in Winston-Salem and then Animazement's in Raleigh. So it's like, maybe a little over an hour away, something like that. And so the idea that these 2 people who live in Winston-Salem, who are fans of this and decided not to go to Triad, it like that I think really speaks to where we are economically on that. And I know we talked about while we were there, like Alon was saying like, yeah, man, like I'm not seeing a lot of people in the autograph line.
Yeah. I mean, that first day that we were there, I remember we got all set up. We did our first panel. As I was coming back from our first panel, even early in a con, I'm used to people being lined up for autographs and headshots and like all kinds of stuff like that. The whole guest area had, I think, like 5 people who were not guests or handlers or staff. Like 5 people who were there in line in any way to talk to guests. There were 5 guests at the Triad AnimeCon. So like one person per guest as I'm coming back from admittedly, this is the first day we're there, but it's a Friday. So it's not because Triad's a 3-day con. So it's not like a Thursday where it's like, yeah, they open on Thursday, but no one's really there on Thursday. No, this is Friday. This is Friday evening. So a lot of the people who are first day con attendees are definitely there at this point. Only like 5 people in line. And it's like that to me was like, this is going to be a quiet con.
It felt like there were fewer people there than the last couple of years we've been there. I definitely got that sense. Even like, it's hard to tell when you're walking through sort of the central hallway and everybody's just hanging out there on the couches and stuff like that. But then once you start seeing the crowd getting into the vendor hall every morning and trying to leave when the hall closes, you really start to get an idea of how thin it is with people there. And talking about the vendors in the hall with us, like, we were on one end of it, so I can't really speak to how things were going in the artist alley or anything like that. But I definitely felt like there were fewer people making purchases at a lot of the standard booths that we've seen at a lot of those. Like, we talked to one person who we've seen their booth in years past at a couple of different conventions, but they essentially do like reproductions of Japanese style clothing, like kimono and obi and things like that. And they told me that they were actually doing pretty well. And I think the sword guys were doing pretty well. Like the guys who have like the sort of screen accurate replica swords and things like that. But those are like, that's a different kind of product, I think, that is, I'm not going to go so far as to call it recession proof, because that's not what I'm trying to say. But if you are a con vendor and at booth A, you've got sort of the Japanese import food, booth B, you've got, a large dice company or something like that. Booth C, you've got somebody making like kimono, like, if you can only spend so much, what are you going to spend it on? The thing you probably can't get elsewhere without a lot of trouble.
Right. I think the biggest point there is that is the sort of purchase that you knew you were coming to this con to make.
It is a high information, high consideration purchase, like a vehicle, essentially, if we're going to put it on a scale of something like that. Whereas we are an impulse buy. We're an impulse sort of low consideration purchase. And that's not right, because there's tons of people in that space, and that's not knocking it or anything. It's not pejorative. It's just sort of that's where it falls on sort of the marketing spectrum of things.
Though hopefully you're not signing a 5-year lease with your bank in order to afford an OB at an anime convention. Hopefully.
Yeah. Now, having said that, I told myself this year that if they had the collector's edition Dragon Zord, I was going to buy it. But they did, because last year I decided not to, wisely. But this year I was like, this might be one of the last times I get a chance to buy something stupid for myself. So if they have it, maybe I'll get it, but they didn't have it.
I have a new con trend this year for 2025 because, it's been a couple revolutions now, and I've kind of bought all the things that I need. For like my outfits or whatever, game systems. I'm always happy to pick up a couple of those just to leaf through them. I mean, I don't have friends to play with. So there's that. But my new strat has been to go down Artist Alley and like just have something in mind to get from each vendor. Like even if it's just a small sticker, I'm trying to get collections of things. So for 2025. An extension of my 2024 shenanigans, but starting from MagFest was to find the spiciest stickers I can find for art. I'll take it, but the more depraved, the better. Like I want to really look through the catalog and see what is the kinkiest stuff that the artist has on offer.
Yeah, and I felt like Artist Alley with the several times I walked down it, I felt like that was the place getting the most traction.
I think people want to support creatives, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that driving motivator.
The only stuff I bought while I was there was from an Artist Alley vendor. I bought like a tote bag with this really cool illustration of a possum with fairy wings. I got a pair of earrings with that design. I got a pencil book. There's several things.
I was hearing reports from GDC, though, that a lot of the Canadian game devs weren't showing up because of the nonsense happening. And I don't blame them. Yeah. I don't blame anyone for wanting to not visit
the US
in this state.
I've heard rumors that people are looking ahead toward Gen Con. Like if they're from Canada, they might not go to it.
I mean, there's been several occasions where someone successfully crosses the border into the U.S. and then gets mysteriously detained for no proper reason, I guess is the words I will use.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't blame anybody who doesn't want to internationally travel into the U.S. right now.
Yeah. There's a lot of question marks around that, but for some of these people, and this is where we can get to start talking about just sort of how this economic situation really affects us as an industry. And I guess I'm sort of lumping us in there in a very sort of loose, casual way, because we're not a big printing behemoth or anything like that. But, let's look.
Nor do we have tokens or any other kind of game assets that we are regularly like molding and shipping as part of our products. So that's a big part of it.
Right. But let's look at Steve Jackson Games, for example, and we've talked about them several times over the last 6 months, because their CEO during the election was like, if this tariff stuff happens, this is going to be a really existential thing. And you'll remember that when we were at PAX Unplugged in December, I was going around asking a bunch of the indie creators, like the smaller publishers and things like that, how are you feeling about the tariffs? Because a lot of these people, probably 95% of them, print in China. And there was fear in their eyes when I asked the question, and they really didn't want me to ask it. They nobody was upset, but I could tell they did not want to engage with it. I think on the last episode we had where I was talking to Lucas, I don't remember if this made it into the episode, but I remember saying to him, I remember I asked that question and your eyes just went really wide. He's like, yeah, they did, because we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't we're trying to get this book printed. But still, getting back to my example, Steve Jackson Games, right? They are going to be losing so much money just doing the printing on some of this stuff that does it make sense then to spend more money to come to events in the US? Because they were at PAX Unplugged and I didn't go talk to them then because she had already put out that statement then, so I sort of knew where they stood on it. But she came out with another statement the other day when the 54% tariffs were levied, and we should say, as we're recording this, this is after the pause where basically everything except China has had their tariffs reduced to 10%, but China still has the 54% reciprocal tariffs.
No, China has 125% right now.
Yeah, that's right. But looking at the message, I'll read the message from the CEO, Meredith Placco.
Are you gonna do voice acting?
I was going to say, I can't read it on my screen, and I have a big screen.
I can read it on my big screen. I can't actually zoom on the screen here, but it says...
Can you make the window wider?
It's an image that I've uploaded. I'm not screen sharing. Yeah. But it says an important message from our CEO, Meredith Placco. Actually, if you guys in our Discord channel, if you want to scroll up to it and click on it, that'll make it big enough to read. On April 5th, the 54% tariff goes into effect on a wide range of goods imported from China. For those of us who create board games, this is not just a policy change, it's a seismic shift. At Steve Jackson Games, we are actively assessing what this means for our products, our pricing, and our future plans. We do know that we can't absorb this kind of cost increase without raising prices. We've done our best over the past few years to shield players and retailers from the full brunt of rising freight costs and other increases, but this new tax changes the equation entirely. And that's another aspect of it, too, is that they were already seeing increased costs for freight and warehousing. Here are the numbers. A product we might have manufactured in China for $3 last year could now cost $4.62 before we even ship it across the ocean. Add freight, warehousing, fulfillment, and distribution margins, and that once $25 game quickly becomes a $40 product. That's not a luxury upcharge. That's survival math. Some people ask, why not manufacture in the US? I wish we could, but the infrastructure to support full-scale board game production, specialty dice making, die cutting, custom plastic and wood components doesn't meaningfully exist here. I've gotten quotes. I've talked to factories. Even when the willingness is there, the equipment, labor, and timelines simply aren't. We aren't the only company facing this challenge. The entire board game industry is having a very difficult conversation right now. For some, this might mean simplifying our products or delaying launches. For others, it might mean walking away from titles that are no longer economically viable. And for what I fear will be too many, it means closing down entirely. Tariffs, when part of a long-term strategy to bolster domestic manufacturing, can be an effective tool, but that only works when there's a plan to build up the industries needed to take over production. There's no national plan in place to support manufacturing for the types of products we make. This isn't about steel and semiconductors. This is about paper goods, chipboard, wood tokens, plastic trays, and color-matched ink. These new tariffs are imposing huge costs without providing alternatives, and it's going to cost American consumers more at every level of the supply chain. We want to be transparent with our community. This is real. Prices are going up. We're still determining how much and where. If you're frustrated, you're not alone. We are too. And if you want to help, write to your elected officials. You can find your representative and senators' contact information at house.gov and senate.gov. Ask them how these new policies help American creators and small businesses, because right now it feels like they don't. We'll keep making games, but we'll be honest when the road gets harder, because we know you care about where your games come from and about the people who make them. That is sobering, just sort of how plainly she lays it out there, because she's right. Like, everybody, when you think about what you're buying, all you ever think about is like the product in your hand and what you're getting, but there's an entire supply chain, and each level of it like lives off of their own margins, and you can only cut in so much before it becomes unprofitable for everybody on the value chain. That's why forward integration and backward integration are things, because it's people trying to shorten their supply chain, shorten their value chain. And because of the reasons she lays out there, like there not being really any sort of American infrastructural base for this kind of production, and there wasn't a chance to spin it up or anything like that, there's really very little opportunity for somebody like a Steve Jackson Games, just using them as an example, to be like, well, okay, well, we will invest heavily in or buy this manufacturing facility so we can produce this stuff, and it'll be sort of a long-term savings for a short-term upfront cost. There's no place in the United States to do that. And I remember in the statement that she put out last year, she was talking about like, yeah, I've even looked at places in South America, and it's just not there either. Like, the cost savings wouldn't be significant enough to do that.
Well, and it's not just that. It's you need a specific quality and quantity. Mm-hmm. And like, even if you're not looking at cost savings, the problem that a place like Steve Jackson Games runs into trying to print domestically is, even if we count North America, Central America, and South America as domestic, there's just not that kind of manufacturing process in any of those places. China has spent decades building up factories and machines and a variety of very, very carefully crafted and honed devices for this kind of work, and nowhere else has been doing that same kind of degree, except for places that are also dealing with Chinese components as part of assembly. So your Taiwan, your Vietnam, your India to a lesser extent, but like, these are all places you can get some of this work done, but you can't get it done as fast. You can't get it done as reliably, and you can't get it done at the same kind of quantity counts.
Yeah. And I think Apple actually shifted some of their manufacturing to India in anticipation of stuff like this. I think there was a story about them airlifting like a couple of huge deliveries of iPhones into the US just like the day before it happened. They airlifted them in from India. But the other part of this, and I'm gonna try not to wade into information where I don't have the facts in front of me, but just very simply, like, let's say we wake up tomorrow and there is an American manufacturing plant that can do wood chips, that can do 3D printing of plastic at the scale that we need for this kind of thing, can do all the board game pieces. The people who work there are going to have to be paid American wages. So that cost is going to have to be passed on. Any domestic manufacturing is going to have a cost increase just because of the higher standard of living and the higher salary expectations of an American worker. Like, that's why stuff from China is cheap, because they don't pay them a lot there. And we can argue back and forth about, the ethics of that, but just objectively, that's why.
Yeah. Go ahead, Enver.
I'd love to see a comparison of what it actually costs in human labor versus what we're paying with the tariffs. Just because I think I saw someone make that same point recently about, I don't know, a dishwasher, I think was the reference point. A dishwasher costing something like $1,000 if it was made prior tariffs to it being, I don't know, $2,700 made in America. And I don't know what the between is.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think we can trust any of those numbers, because I saw something similar about, like, iPhones, for example. Like, an iPhone, like a Foxconn manufactured iPhone is going to cost like $2,000, $2,500 or something like that. Those are, I think, to a certain extent, those are like uninformed panic numbers. And given that the actual, like, tariff numbers weren't necessarily grounded in reality, I don't know if we should be looking at those numbers as any more or less grounded in reality.
That's a good point. I mean, I would say that we don't know where the tariffs are going to end up at the end of it all. Like, it is
True.
Such whiplash with the way they're being applied and then taken away and then being raised exponentially. Like, nobody knows where this is going. So speaking with any surety on the subject is a fool's errand, I'm sure. And
just, while we're on the subject and before I forget about it, it's not just nice and games. So, and if I can understand if somebody especially if you're newer to tabletop, maybe you're not as familiar with Steve Jackson games, but they did like Munchkin, GURPS, going back a long time. Kobold Press, probably much more familiar to a lot of people. And Wolfgang Bauer, who was, a big deal in D&D years ago, like around the 3.5 edition thing, went on to be the CEO of Kobold Press. But he has his State of Play blog, and he posted something about, the potential for tariffs last year, just sort of when everybody was in like, well, okay, we know something's going to happen come January 20th, but we don't know what it is. And he's saying, largely the same thing that Steve Jackson Games is saying, because he says not everything's going to cost more. We're holding the line where we can. Our PDF, Kindle, audiobook, VTT stuff, all our digital stuff is going to cost the same. So, maybe this becomes something, and that's a good point, because maybe this becomes something that, much like COVID, drives people more and more toward digital play, right?
Yeah.
Prices on existing hardcovers in the warehouse remain the same, because, they already paid the import costs on those, and really it's just carrying costs for them right now to keep them warehoused. But then he starts to talk about projects they've gotten pre-order. Here's the good news. The bad news is items in pre-order will see prices go up because those import taxes are charged the moment they arrive in the U.S. We'll announce the changes as they hit. All existing pre-orders will be honored at the current price. So they're going to eat the cost of that.
Nice. So good for them.
That's interesting. And, there had to have been some kind of calculation there that they only had X number of pre-orders at this stage of whatever. And they're like, well, fine. Some pre-order projects might be canceled, but right now we hope to retain our full schedule. So that's another part of it. Like, they're already looking ahead at like, what are we actually going to be able to afford in terms of this? So I
guess if you've developed a Kickstarter, right, you have to think through every single tier that you're offering and whether or not it's actually affordable to still do so at that tier.
Right. Because remember, like, Kickstarter gets like 30% of it. So you automatically have to plus it up by that much. Kobold Press projects already funded and committed to print via crowdfunding, primarily the Labyrinth World Book, Labyrinth Adventures, and Monster Vault 2 will be printed and sent to backers as promised. Tariffs may need to be charged for U.S. backers. We'll share that information with backers when the time comes. So, so they don't know. They don't know what it's going to look like for that. The result of all this is a large wave of chaos spreading through existing channels, manufacturing relationships, retail distribution chains. The games industry is far from the only or largest field affected, but it's the one with high reliance on overseas production, primarily China, but also Canada and the EU. We're going to see effects as soon as this summer's release hit the harbor. No one's pleased by higher taxes, but we're adaptable. We'll fight hard to keep the price hikes as small as we can while staying in business. So, I mean, I think what's going to happen is Kobold is planning to run lean for probably 4 years at this point. They are going to go in because Kobold Press doesn't have a huge number of full-time employees. If I recall correctly, I think it's maybe like low 2 digits because they like a lot of these Wizards does the same thing, is they just have a lot of contract labor for a lot of the content creation stuff, like hiring writers and things like that. But so I think we're going to see Kobold Press's release schedule get slimmed down over the next 4 years. Maybe instead of 3 things, they produce 2 things, or maybe just one really good thing. I think they're going to be producing fewer of things. I think they're going to be focusing more on digital. I think they're going to try and push people more toward VTTs. I just think it's survival math at this point.
It seems to be the natural progression. Like TTRPGs aren't going to go anywhere. You're just going to have to print them yourself.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because we were like, AI is going to be the thing that really puts the screws to tabletop, because you're going to have, AI dungeon masters and things like that.
Maybe you're still going to have scheduling issues, right? You're still going to have chemistry issues with the party.
But like now it's like, oh, okay, maybe it's like actual like global economics and protectionism that's going to be the thing that hurts this as much. Because like when he's talking about stuff coming in from Canada, like I know a lot of paper that comes into the United States is produced in Canada. Because like when I worked in the news business during the first Trump administration, he put tariffs on Canada for paper imports, and it drove like a round of layoffs where I was working, because next to payroll, the paper cost is the second highest cost for newspaper organizations. So that might be what he's talking about there. But I really encourage everybody to go read this blog. It's got a lot of good information, because he's just basically like, he's like, we can't absorb this and stay in business. Like any hardcover printed outside the United States will cost from between 20 to 54% more to produce. And he references the Steve Jackson game statement too. So like them releasing that, I think, was what spurred him to write this. But he's like, there's no way to just move these products to the US. Like they've got to, like, unless Steve Jackson wants to get somebody in China or a third country and have this stuff shipped to the third country, and then that person sit there and individually mail all these things to the US, which is going to cost more because we won't be getting freight rates, but at least be able to escape the tariff cost on it from commercial shipping. It's just, there's no way out of this other than digital, like focusing on digital really, but your margins are so small there. Like again, in the news industry, that's part of the problem there.
Well, then I think maybe we should talk about some VTT options for the next episode.
Yeah, definitely. Because there's one fewer.
I do have a little bit of quick good news on the side of like Canada does a lot of printing for us. Canada tariffs haven't changed. You've probably heard of like 25% tariffs on Canada. That's for auto parts and machine parts and metal sheets and things like that.
Aren't we tariffing their lumber too? Wasn't that the whole reason why we're taking a chainsaw to our national parks? Our reliance on their wood? Oh,
God. No, that got walked back. So there's been discussion of, we'd like to do this, and then every time they get close to doing it, or an executive order gets published that has no basis in reality, or things like that, like those end up getting walked back. So that has yet to pan out for them. The USMCA agreement still is upheld, I should say, though, which means that if the material is coming from somewhere other than Mexico, Canada, or the U.S., which I think is part of why the U.S. wants to take the chainsaws to our national parks again, that will get tariffed significantly. So if they import from, I think even like South America, because it's Mexico, it's not Central or South America, it's just Mexico. That is part of that agreement. So if they get the wood from anywhere else and ship it to Canada, and then they use it to make paper, and then they bring that into the US, and the US goes, oh, you got this from the forests of Colombia, then that's bad news. It's going to be tariffed significantly higher.
Yeah. And, keep in mind with South America too, like there's no road from South America to Central America to North America. Everything has to come in by air or by port.
Right.
Whenever I'm dissecting policy, I like to think about the enforcement problem. And I see a huge one here. How can you possibly enforce these kind of tariffs, which change on a daily basis? Is it that easy to implement into everybody's payment systems? I mean,
I think so, just because ship comes over, ship docks, stuff is unloaded from ship, manifest is checked, value is listed on the manifest, add percentage, swipe card. Like that's
percentage is being maintained by a competent group of people. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Still some vulnerability for failure.
I mean, there's always vulnerability for failure, right? Like
I like to think that it's an exceptionally big window for failure.
And you would want, and you would think that for something that's allegedly generating revenue, like there would be special attention paid to it to make sure that the revenue was collected properly. But then you have the IRS, which is seeing most of its employees let go when it's a revenue generating agency for the United States. But really what we're looking at, and this is where we sort of veer into like political talk a little bit more, but like what we're looking at here is potentially the idea of replacing income tax with tariffs, like it's 1930 or something like that. So maybe that's where this shift is, and maybe that's the answer to the enforcement question, is that we're going to become so reliant on it that they'll have to.
If the things I've seen are correct, for every dollar we spend maintaining national parks, national parks make $8.50.
Yeah.
Those are the sorts of return rates that CEOs would murder people at night for.
Yeah. And it's similar to like the British monarchy, because people are like, why do we still have the monarchy? Why do we still have the monarchy? It's because for every dollar that the state like spends on the monarchy, they get so much back in terms of tourism that it's in the best interest of the United Kingdom to keep the monarchy going for as long as possible. What an episode this has been on a number of topics.
Not normally a political podcast, but we thank you for listening to however many minutes we've made it through. I know we had some lead in time, but we also have a couple of deep dives that we want to get to. And I think before we sign off, we were going to talk a little bit about the cons that we're going to go to in the future. Some are local, some are tiny, and we like to support the smaller convention builders. So take it away, Brandon. What's up next?
Yeah, we've changed up our convention calendar a little bit this year from when we talked about it before, but we're definitely still at Animazement in May 23, 24, 25. This will be an interesting one for us because it's the actually I looked into this, and even with that first GalaxyCon we did, we still had other stuff going on. So this will technically be the first time we ever go to a convention just as a vendor. Like, we're not doing panels there. We're not doing performances. We're not running organized games or anything like that. So it'll be a really interesting experiment for us to see, like, is it worthwhile going as a vendor? So if you're in the Raleigh area, May 23rd, 24th, 25th, come by, get your pass for Animazement and come help us make it worthwhile for us to just go to cons as a vendor. And then getting into the summer, things lighten up a little bit. Like we'll have like BubbleCon.
Bubbles Con. It's a zine con, and it's super local. Friend of a friend. We're very excited to be invited. I think that these are normally professional zine makers, which is not really our niche, but I think we're willing to try by making our own TTRPG zine. Hopefully an adventure. I would really like it to be an adventure. But if it's just a zine on cursed objects, like that'd be chill too. And we'll see what we can do for you.
Yeah, and then we'll keeping with the hyperlocal theme. We'll be at RippleCon, which is the Richmond Public Library's one-day con, which is just a fun little community thing to do, and we might be running organized games there this year. So that should be fun. And then in August, we have Once Upon a Con, which is actually just a little bit up the road at the Gaylord, where MagFest is, and we'll be there in some capacity. We will be there at least vending, maybe doing some more stuff. We'll see how that plays out. But this will be our first time being at that con because it used to be in Pennsylvania and now it's moved to Maryland. So that's August. And then I don't think we have anything in September. Do we?
I know I'm going to be going to PAX East in May.
Yeah.
So and I'll be there.
And we don't know what the Gen Con plan is at all, do we?
No.
We are, for September, we are having conversations with Colossal Con East.
Oh, that's right. I forgot all about that.
It's nothing's in stone yet. We don't have anything signed with them as of yet, but we are talking to them. So there's a non-zero chance that if you're a regular at Colossal Con East, you will see us there this year.
Okay. Well, I've been putting in a lot of work to make that happen, so it'd be good to see some people out there.
Yeah. And then October we'll be at BergQuest in Williamsburg again, which is still kind of localish, but not hyper local like some of the other ones. And that's fun. That'll be another 3-day con.
I'm excited. It's going to be at the William and Mary campus in the Sadler Center. That's hilarious. I can't wait.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They had a great time trying to find a location there because it had to be within Williamsburg city limits. And he's like, oh man, like just trying to find a place with open dates. This is getting wild. That's why it took them so long to confirm with us.
Should just have the entire convention take over Colonial Williamsburg.
That would be amazing. Like a convention run fair in Colonial Williamsburg.
Hell yeah.
Make it happen, BergQuest. You can do it.
We believe in you.
And then might have something in November. We'll see how that plays out. We have to have a conversation, but we'll see what happens there.
PAX Unplugged always at the end of the year, and then back up to MagFest. But
yeah.
We'll keep you posted on the cons that we end up attending. Stay tuned for Animazement and all of the other local ones because those are going to be something to check out.
You mentioned MagFest. I'm putting a call out to all of our listeners. Pay attention to all the MagFest social media feeds for when they announce when they open the 1 hour block period of applications to the vendor hall so we don't miss it. I'm checking their Twitter every day and I've also sent them an email asking for information.
We got to set up a Google alert or something for you, but for sure, type it in the chat in our YouTube video, put it into our podcast comments on whatever podcast you're listening to, or hit us up on our Discord because we definitely have one of those.
And Brandon, I have terrible news. Last year was not a 1 hour window. Last year was like a 10-minute window.
Jesus. Okay. Well, we'll do what we can. I know a couple of years ago.
We're going to do what we can.
I emailed them a couple of years ago about it, and they were like, we got so overwhelmed, within the first few minutes of the app. I was like, well, yeah. It just, I think it makes more sense to do it as a lottery. It's less struggle on everybody. I feel like it's fair.
I feel like the solution is you make everybody, as they're submitting their application, enter a field which is what genre of vendor are you?
That's what I'm thinking, because lottery doesn't work Because then you just get you might get like a whole bunch of game designers or a whole bunch of
they
artists.
actually, because I've submitted us to vend at a lot of places. Most of them actually do have something like that in their Google form, where it's like it's either a drop down or it's like describe the genre of your stuff that you're selling. And I think usually, like especially like if we're at anime cons or something like that, when we're a tabletop vendor, I think that is something that sets us apart in those, because they don't have a lot of those.
Yeah. And so that way, if they've got like 5 TTRPG places that apply and 1,000 different artists, you know, your artist alley can only be but so big. I get that. I understand that. But give us a chance. Let us apply.
If we are able, well, actually, I was about to say if we are able to vend at MagFest, if we're vending at Once Upon, I hope that they fixed the Katsucon issue. Where
they've gotta, right?
They did. And it turns out, good news for anyone who's heard about this. If you haven't heard about this.
Wait, what happened?
A pipe burst over the
Artist
vending
alley.
hall.
Yeah, over Artist Alley specifically.
And dropped what people said was real stinky, probably sewer water. The good news is it wasn't sewer water. It was gray water from the kitchens. The bad news is that's still pretty gross and very stinky and very easy to ruin a lot of merchandise.
Yeah, I hope those people were reimbursed.
Yeah, I do too.
I also hope so.
Yeah. All right. Are we done?
Wow, the professionalism.
We got to tell people all the things.
Roll the tape, Jish.
They need to telephone, telegraph, tell a friend about the Goblins and Growlers podcast, because it's their words from their mouths that are exactly what we need to spread the word about our podcast.
Mouth words.
If you haven't already reviewed the podcast on your podcatcher of choice, please do so, provided you're going to give it whatever that top tier review looks like on your podcatcher. If you've got like very middling thoughts or even negative thoughts about the show, then we welcome you to join us on our Discord, bit.ly/Goblin Discord, and have a conversation with us about, you know, the things you feel about the show are middling, and let's see if we can bring you around in any way or shape or form. We don't need to have a review that's like a 3-star. That's not necessary. You can find all of our various links and things at linktr.ee/goblins and growlers. That has not just like the website and some of the social media for the like company at large. It's also got the link to sign up for the newsletter that Brandon publishes, which he spends a lot of time working very hard on. It's a very quick read, very informative, very excellent. We'll see around July time how consistent it becomes, because we know that sleep will not be a thing you're getting consistently.
But maybe I'll have to be
up
in the middle of the night and I'll need something to do.
See, that's what I was going to say. Whether that becomes writing time or stared blankly at the wall and imagine what existence was like back when you were allowed to have sleep, I don't know. We'll find out together. Check out our Patreon, patreon.com/goblins growlers. We ate the and, I believe is what Inver usually says.
Yeah.
It was delicious. We thought that it was the first half of sandwich, but we left the S. The Patreon's got a variety of cool things on it, including the deep dives for this show, and also some one-page. We're finally publishing one-page dungeons again. Y'all, we are publishing one-page dungeons again on the Patreon. So if that's something that you were hyped for back in the day, and then we stopped doing it, and you were like, well, I'm going to support some other folks with my sweet, sweet, hard-earned lucre, that's fine. We understand. We appreciate any support that you have given us in the past or may give us in the future. We back on that grind, y'all. We back on that grind.
I also uploaded the 24-page Ashcan PDF of the Ghostlight Galleon Volume 1. Up there, and I've got another Ashcan that's going to go up, and then after I think Inver gets me some other art, there might be another one that goes up there, and then after Art gets me some other art, there might be another one that goes up there.
Inver, you need to get art and bring her to Brandon so that he can put things up. That's what I'm hearing.
I don't know that that's my job description, but you got it, boss.
We've got a Twitch channel. It's been a little quiet very recently because all of us have been drowning with work responsibilities. But we're going to bring it back. It's going to come back alive. Go follow us so that when it does, you're ready for us. Twitch.tv/goblins_and_growlers. And last, but certainly not least, follow our sister podcast, Quid Pro Roll, on your podcatcher of choice. That is the show where Brandon and I play very ludicrous, kind of goofy characters in my wife's very theoretically, it started out theoretically as a serious campaign, and then we clowned on it too hard. And now it's a little bit of a goofy campaign with some serious tones to it. We are in our second to last arc overall period. So we are very close to releasing everything that is part of campaign 1. And then, of course, Alex has already been hard at work on what is to become campaign 2. Follow along. I think that's everything.
Okay.
Speaking of following, I changed my username. You can follow me at Inverlist now. If you have questions, ask me in DMs. I will only respond there. If you can get in.
No YouTube comments for you. All right. Well,
if you send YouTube comments, we'll forward them to Inver's.
I will not. I will not be a messenger.
I have a very specific summoning ritual that has to be conducted over YouTube if you want to get into contact with me. But step 1 is to tag Jish. So yeah.
It's true. As a simulacrum, it is my responsibility to provide that. I only just realized, looking at the video, that I inverted my tag and my name when I was loading up StreamYard today. So for everyone who's been watching on YouTube and it's like, why is Josh different today?
You can find Josh at Josh Maltby on social media.
You can't. You really can't.
There's powerful full name.
There's only a couple of places that have my name as part of it. And here's the fun thing. There is a CEO in, I think, Canada who also is Josh Maltby in most places. And I guarantee you're going to find him before you find me.
A friend of mine shares a name with somebody who is active in the horse betting industry, and if you look up his name on Twitter, it's that guy.
It's always the best kind of shield.
Very briefly, when my friend had a Twitter account, his Twitter bio was just "not the horse guy."
And so our podcast has ended. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. We'll see you in the deep dives probably next week when that actually launches. But in the meantime, have a good one. Stay safe.
Bye, y'all.